Dear friends, in spring year 70 Common Era, few days before Passover, Roman armies laid siege to Jerusalem. And at the end of August that year, year 70, Romans captured and set fire to the temple. That was a turning point in Jewish but also Christian history. A cataclysmic event, major upheaval, tectonic shift. From that moment on, Judaism was changed. Temple aristocracy lost its seat and its purpose. A radical zealot party was defeated and killed off. And Essenes disappeared from the scene from their desert dwellings. Probably they joined the fight at the end and were killed off as well. The Pharisees, the rabbinical Judaism, was what was left. But from that moment, Christianity was also changed. The Jewish Christians, a powerful voice in the early church, were either also killed or certainly dispersed, and their theological and spiritual platform in Jerusalem was lost. Suddenly, theological positions of Apostle Paul, open towards Hellenistic world, were vindicated. But regardless of these long-term results, first reaction was an utter shock and confusion and mental and spiritual upheaval among Jews as well as Christians. And this is best attested in the Gospels, in the so-called little or synoptic apocalypse in Mark 13, Matthew 24 and 25, and Luke 21. It is presented as Jesus is predicting the fall of Jerusalem and destruction of the temple and imminent eschaton, the end of the world. And this particular unit within the Synoptic Gospels, from the 19th century, theologians and scholars knew this was not what Jesus actually said and how he said it. Jesus shared, to be sure, Jewish eschatology, expectation of the end. And he was in tension, spoke and even acted against the temple and its hierarchy. But don't be mistaken by all the arguments with the Pharisees in synoptical gospels as their main enemies of early church or Jesus. The biggest tension was with Romans, and even more so with the Roman collaborators, the Sadducees, the Herodians, temple hierarchy. So Jesus spoke and acted against the temple. That's right. But Little Apocalypse was likely written as a Jewish or Jewish Christian apocalyptic pamphlet long before that. Some scholars suggest, and I agree with them, that the first stage of this religious political pamphlet was a crisis of Emperor Caligula, who wanted to install in Jerusalem temple his own statue. But then it thankfully did not happen because he was assassinated in Rome, and that pamphlet went to sleep. But again became relevant something like 30 years later during the Jewish war and the siege of Jerusalem. And after Jerusalem and its temple was destroyed, it was adopted and edited by Christians. It was their early way to deal with and process this major upheaval and catastrophe. And because Jesus was on record, as I mentioned earlier, being against the temple, this Jewish apocalyptic pamphlet was adopted and adapted, edited into synoptical gospels as Jesus' speech, as his prophecy. Those who are using it, who are using this passage to scare people in the 21st century about the imminent end of the world, for instance, are simply wrong. It was and still is vaticinium ex eventu, prediction from what had happened around the fall of Jerusalem. And thus, it is an heroic attempt to make sense of this political, military, and spiritual tectonic shift and major catastrophe in Jewish and Christian tradition. And that is something you might not know about the Bible. Join us this Sunday. This little apocalypse, or synoptic apocalypse, will help us to look how major tragedies shape and shift spiritual climate.